The boys are back in town for another tongue tie off on pacesetters.au. Cody Winnell is here, raising my hand. Jay Bond's the fella shadow boxing over there. Hey, Jace.
G'day, Coates. Yeah, I like this meeting. We're going to have some talking points first of all, obviously. But when we get stuck into the form, it's one of those. I talk about null hypothesis all the time. So I like to have an idea of what I think I'm going to like, and then you do the exploration and the excavation, and you try and confirm your hypothesis or resist it. And unfortunately, this week, a lot of those early ideas have been challenged. The maps, I looked originally, and the maps seemed very set in stone. But the more you excavate, the trickier they get, I reckon. And I think you agree.
Yeah, I must admit the maps. It's a difficult game at the best of times. Speed maps. Back in the days of the good form days, Jace, I thought
you believe in them, don't you, Coates?
My oath, I do. But the issue I've got is I absolutely believe in them, especially if you're playing exotics, which are a great way to play in harness racing, as we know, and especially at Melton.
Race one could be an example.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But, I rated your maps always as one of the highest parts of your form, Jace, because, a lot of punters in the form students in the history of time always can find something to win or each way. Not wanting to piss in your pocket too much, Jace, but you were able to actually bring in those money races and those staggered trifectas. Now, that's something that not a lot of punters, especially in thoroughbreds, would necessarily have been aware of if not for good form.
No, well, I think the key is, and we'll get stuck to the talking points in a moment, but I think the key is that, all the stats that I'm going to bring out during the form preview tonight, they're all linked to maps. So there's one race in particular, save the reveal for a little bit later, but it's a critical case of horses and how exponentially better they go when they find the front compared to when they don't find the front. Some horses love to trail. Some horses actually love to be three poles. They just don't want to do anything early. There's horses who can do work in the run and like playing the enforcer, but under certain circumstances, horses can win from the second row more often than the front row because the front row doesn't help them. They have no early speed. So I find the maps, it's all linked, isn't it? The maps, the stats, the sectionals, everything we do, and we're going to talk a little bit about data in a moment.
It's a great puzzle, Jace.
It's all part of a big equation. So you can't have one without the other. Married with children, love and marriage,
El Bundy,
horse and carriage. You can't have one
Peg
without
Bundy.
The other.
Who were the kids again? Kelly Bundy and Bud. That's it. Yeah.
What was one of my favourite shows, but
no, not as good as Seinfeld. Not a bad show.
Did you know Michael Richards from Seinfeld auditioned to play Ted Bundy?
I didn't know that, but that works in a way.
Ted Bundy was a serial killer. Yeah,
yeah. A little
El
different.
Bundy.
El Bundy. Yep. There's a horse, El Bundy. Greg Norman, I think, trained El Bundy, didn't he?
He auditioned for that role. So there you go.
That is. We got a couple of talking points before we get stuck into the form, which we threw out on Twitter, Jace, today. And the 2 points we want to talk about are, you've touched on data versus human intuition with form. Yep. That'll be our second talking point, but we're going to kick it off with something that's a little topical. And it's a little topical, I think, since I've certainly started getting stuck back into the form the last couple of weeks with this show. I was surprised to find, Jace, that the fixed odds for the Metro program have almost fallen off the map completely during the week.
You're bringing maps back into it already.
What did I say? Yeah, the map. Exactly. I thought I totally stuffed that. Yeah, they've fallen off the face of the earth, Jason. I remember not that long ago, we'd have fixed odds being revealed through Tab in our partnership that we had back at HQ, and those odds would come out during the week, and they'd create talking points for your good self and others right throughout the week and stimulate early wagering and all that jazz. It doesn't happen anymore. Your thoughts?
Well, a few. Number one, I haven't been called Jason in a long time, so thank you for that. And it's normally when I'm in trouble. So Jason, Eric, whatever, Jay Bond. Here are my thoughts. It was never good enough, was it? I mean, even when they were coming out a little bit earlier, and you might have, and we still get, what have we got, 2 races this week?
2 races, yep.
You might get 3. It's funny, the 2 races that they've chosen. I mean, they're the free-for-alls, I guess. It makes it easier for them, but it's never been what it should be. Hopefully, maybe next week, if I can coach him on. The person that I've learnt the most from when it comes to this entire maelstrom, this situation, is Craig Knott. He has got brilliant avant-garde ideas, but I've learned plenty from a lot of people. What we know, so going back to the novice level, what we know is that the markets, or the fixed odds markets for harness racing, don't come up as early as the other two codes, primarily for two reasons. One, they disrespect us. A little bit Rodney Dangerfield. I can't get no respect.
I can't get no respect.
But two, and this is just set in stone, that if you do the ratios of high quality punters on harness racing versus the everyday, don't want to call them mugs because, I've been a mug in the past as well, but the mugs, it's
the next race
not,
punter, Jace, the next race punter.
I like that. That's far more diplomatic. The ratio is very different in harness racing to thoroughbred racing. Thoroughbred racing probably has, 95% of punters trying to play into those early markets, and only 5% or 10% that actually know what they're doing. Harness racing has a ridiculous preponderance of high quality analysts, professional punters, that can tear you asunder. So they're frightened of that, obviously. So that's a big part of the reason why the early markets don't go up. But there's no way we can improve the sport. Wagering is linked to prize money. We know that. There's no way we can improve it unless we get something going, and it's not helping us either, because we're here talking about our tips on a Thursday night, Friday morning, gets uploaded and published, and we don't know what we're dealing with, do we?
We're flying blind, and that leads me to harness.org.au, right? And we see prices being. I don't know if all states put them up, but it's a service that the HQ in each state will put up. And that's merely, obviously, a form analyst's view of that race turned into the price. Sometimes they get them right, sometimes they get them wrong, and sometimes they can be pretty, I don't want to say badly wrong, because it's all a game of opinions. But you get a $6 shot might be marked, or a horse is marked a $6 shot. It goes around $1.80, and that also doesn't help anyone, because it leaves the first-time punter who sees that price with a pretty sour taste in their mouth when they go to put $10 on it. It's $1.80.
Well, I think the biggest issue, and we're not having a go at anyone in particular. Personally, I used to spend more time trying to get the markets close to right than the tips, because sometimes you look at a race and go, I can't, like top four, who knows? And you try your best there. But if you get the markets right, the biggest issue, I think, is when a horse is very likely to start about $1.40 and you see it on the website at $2.20 or $2.30, because you go on there, you have a quick squeeze. It's a Thursday night, and you just want to have a quick look at the fields, and you see $2.50 about a horse that you really like, and you think, I am going to go berserk here. This $2.50, and then it comes up $1.40, and you just get learned helplessness, don't you? Like, you just get frustrated and aggravated, and eventually then you turn away. So that's why the prices are so critical. And there's been a couple of ideas over the years. I have offered in the past, over many years, to say, recuse myself from betting on the meeting and assist with a wagering service provider to try and, I'm not going to get them all right either, but if you've got a couple of minds working together, it's going to help. That wasn't used.
Full disclosure, we floated this idea a few years back that, well, how about Jason? He won't have a bet. Okay, if you want, let's use those prices to get more fixed odds up early. And quite rightly, I guess from their point of view, they decided, no, we don't want that. We prefer to keep backing ourselves in, and that's fine. That's the choice of the company that we approached for that. But the idea was, take advantage of a service that we're offering.
And I wasn't doing that to say, I'm probably am a little bit better at setting the prices than most of the wagering service providers, but I wasn't doing that in an arrogant way. And to be honest, I would have said to them, particularly if they thought, okay, you're not going to bet, but you'll get a mate to bet, you're going to rort a few prices. I mean, A, that is absolutely not me. And B, I would have said to them, base it on the yield, base it on how it goes. If it's not working, go back to the old system. But what would have been the harm of having a 3-month trial of just seeing we can get them up earlier? And the other one, obviously, was that I've spoken about for many years, is linking with one particular wagering service provider. I know we were hamstrung with the tab deal for a long time, but in more recent times, going to Ladbrokes or a Sportsbet or whoever, and saying, we're going to give you additional data, not just prices from someone in particular, but additional data that others don't have. And we're going to join forces. We're going to merge. You're going to promote us, and we're going to help you get something out of the trots. Hasn't happened, but I don't know the answers any other way. The key is for a start, you need early markets, and this is a big Craig Knott philosophy, because if you've got relatively stable markets a day or two out from the races, you're not having this situation that we're seeing more and more of, where in the last 3 minutes, horses are going from 280 to 150, $4 to 11, because people then look at that and go, I have no idea what's going on. Do they know something I don't? And it's got nothing to do with that. But that is the mindset, and you can understand why, can't you, guys?
100%. Jason, race 2, on that exact point, when the markets opened yesterday, Aldebaran Vera, number 2, opened $5. Very quickly was snapped into $3.40.
Right.
Okay. And today, right, opened $3.40 today, stayed at $3.40. And as I scroll down the entire field, there's been no change in the entire market today. So, we've seen this. We know that's what happens, right? But it's kind of interesting, isn't it? And it's very much a harness racing thing that the market will get opened. Very quickly, the prices correct or change, and then there's really no change until the day of.
So in that case, though, we don't actually know whether Vera is going to end up starting $5 or $2.20, and that's the problem. When you don't have the stability in the market, you don't have. It doesn't matter whether it's trading stocks. If you don't have stability in the market, you don't feel confident about having a bet. And the one thing we discussed recently privately was the fact that those enormous fluctuations aren't necessarily indicative of anything. I came out with all my great stats and wonderful graphics about Aldebaran Zeus last week. Tumbled into $1.45.
$1.45, yep.
Got out to $1.70, but the indication was he's winning. But he did not win.
Well, the indication in the run was that he was going to win until about the 300, 400. But in the run, he had every chance. He was out in front, ready to win, pull the button, go. The money was there. There was a key late, though, wasn't there? $1.45 to $1.70 in one go, almost right at the death.
And that makes it even worse, though, doesn't it? Because it's a swinging instability. So how do we fix it? I'll tell you what. One thing we can do, Codes, before we get on to the next talking point, is you and I make this podcast Joe Rogan massive, and then we start talking. But we start talking and saying, I'll tell you what, we will support a wagering service provider. Anyone that wants to get involved and say, if you give us the markets early, we'll come on, we'll do a little 20-minute early podcast, we'll give our thoughts, but we'll also help them along. So hopefully,
well, we've talked about this too.
That's what'll happen.
This is Fixed Odds Reveal. What an opportunity for a bookmaker to come on board, a WSP, and we say, reveal them at this time. We know that the money will be thrown around and they'll quickly shorten. I mean, that's okay. But for 10 minutes, remember we talked about this a few years ago, for 10, 20 minutes, leave it open. You can cap the bet. Of course, they can manage their books, but just let a few of those $10, $20 punters on as they all come in. You're driving interest in the sport. You're converting punters into the game. Giving them $20 on it, $5 about a horse who might start $3. It's a good taste in their mouth. I'll
tell you what, just lift that to 100, right?
Yeah.
And what you do, which all WSPs do, you profile the punters. And the beauty is you don't leave maybe 50, but you don't leave yourself with a huge liability, but you're immediately aware, and Matt Leopard and Mitch Sidebottom and Darren Carroll go for exactly the same one. Okay, I got this price wrong. You limit the liability by swinging it back in, right? And they're, as you say, with Aldebaran Vera, they're opening the market so large, they don't swing one in early and then drift others. You can just swing one in, can't you?
Yeah, it's not the way. What you're suggesting, Jace, is the old school bookmaking days. Be a bookmaker and take the early couple of $100.
Take the information.
Or have exactly, and that's information. You take that. That's the price you pay for the information. That punter sticks with you, keeps giving you that information, and then when the volume comes, you've made up for your 200-300, whatever it is that you've laid that first punter, and you've got the information. but that's old school bookmaking.
The beauty is very quickly, before we end on this subject, and we are going to explore it further in the next couple of weeks.
Be great to have Noddy on. That's a good call. I like that.
Oh, I would love Noddy to tell us all of his ideas. It's hard to get me not to talk, but I'd just let him go. There's one thing that does happen in punting, and we can talk about this on a podcast, maybe not when you're working for the governing body, but if you found punters were trying to do you a diddle and swing one in because they actually liked a different one, well, you could sort that out. I mean, that's what the profiling's about, number one. And number two, as I mentioned, you don't need to swing something out.
Yeah, you don't have to. Exactly. Spot on.
It's all about protecting yourself. And there's even little things. All the tricks didn't win last week, but they opened at $6, $7. It comes into $3.50, $4. First start, Lara J Farm, Jess Tubbs, Greg Sugars. You just protect yourself.
Yeah.
A bit more, don't you? You say, I'll tell you what, we're going to give you not much of an opportunity to back this, and we're going to leave it at $4.50. Didn't win. They can say that's a win for them, but it's like punting. Sometimes you get it right and you lose, and sometimes you get it wrong and you win.
100%, Jace. Before we go to the next one, very quickly on fixed odds. I don't know if this is a new trend or if it's always been there and I haven't noticed, but more and more, you've got a horse scoring up.
Yeah.
It's been hanging around $4, $3, $3.50, $4, $3.50, $3. It gallops, right, just prior to the start. And you wonder how they all of a sudden were able to push it out to 16s, 17s, 19s like this. And the horse is going around, right, with a late fluctuation of 3.50 out to 4, out to 17, out to 19. I think that feels a little disingenuous, just quietly. But I've noticed it more and more lately.
Coach, just to remind you, our roles in this vodcast, tongue tie off, is for you to be the straight man and for me to be the muckraker. That is the most controversial thing that will be said.
Well, it's the late flux, and you see it all the time. It happened yesterday. Watching one. Just all of a sudden blew out, and I thought, how did anyone have time to get those fluctuations from single figures and consistently right through betting out to $17, $18?
But anyway, I mean, the other factor is Betfair, and we can talk about that further another time as well. I mean, people, Betfairitis, it's called when, the drift is on, you can see it. And there's professional punters that I know. Nick Turnbull, who I had on at one point for the Tuesday tutorial on SEN Track, is one of them. If you're good enough with your reading of markets,
you
don't have to be a form genius. I mean, I prefer to do form. That's not my go. But punting personality, everyone's different. But you can just read the markets. But an interesting point you raise and something we'll discuss further in coming weeks, Codes.
You can just be a good trader. The second part is linked, but it's around data versus the old school picking up a form guide and doing your form by looking and using your memory and black book and all this jazz versus numbers. And you and I have discussed this, lots over the years, Jace, but let's have a talk about it while the record button's on.
Well, I'm pretty passionate about this one. First of all, I'd like to say it's great to get as much data to punters as possible. And whatever you've got, whatever you can find, no one should have to pay for it. Everyone should have it because we know from the thoroughbred world, from the AFL world, NBA, everyone looks at the numbers, don't they? Everyone is an algorithmic genius. Everyone's Isaac Newton or Stephen Hawking here. So, and some people just love that. But I think we'd agree, if there is one sport where data alone won't win the day for you, it's harness racing because, and I go back to maps. So there was one race in particular I was looking at. So race 1, the horse who leads most often in the first race in the card, who would you think it is? You've got,
in race 1 tomorrow.
Yep.
Pole marker. Curly James.
Boy.
Oh, well, sorry. Yeah, okay. Yep.
But
Barry
you are dismissing that
because he's first up from a spell.
For the very reason that we're going to discuss. He's 9 years of age.
Yep.
Right? Older warrior.
Drawn gate 7.
He's drawn out, I think, I've written in the form guide to high five the sports bar patrons as he comes around.
There's speed drawn underneath him.
But if you only had the data,
Yeah, of course. True.
you'd think it was going to lead.
Yep.
He's no chance of leading. Well, he's a
We
1% chance.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
But it would be a strange decision for him to first up be handlebars down and lead from 7 in this
But
race.
it's not only that, it's about intent. It's about
Of course.
who's drawn inside. Like the variables in harness racing, and this has been probably one of the factors that's made it harder for us to bring punters in. Everyone wants life as easy as possible now, don't they? But you have to educate them to go, okay, yes, number 4 here does begin quickly, but have a look at 1, 2, and 3.
Mm.
Now, what normally happens, then you go back and say, what normally happens when they're drawn outside quick beginners? Will they normally restrain? So there's a
Then
bunch
you've got
of
a
factors.
human. Then you've got a human in the cart who's also looking at the data and looking at the form and making a decision based on what they think. And then it's back to intent about that horse on that night.
Yeah.
Right.
And then punters blow up. Punters blow up. Why didn't you lead?
Well, the driver's not sitting
Have a
there,
go.
is he? The driver's not sitting there thinking, okay, it's a computer game. The horse will start at this pace, and I've got no control over that. I'm just going to. It doesn't work that way.
Having
the data
having
would
said
say it does.
I do think from my thousands of interviews out on the track, I do think sometimes, and they can blow up at me if they like, some drivers are too
Please
conservative.
do fire up on social media, folks. Blow
Well,
up at Bond.
I think sometimes drivers are too conservative because I don't know. But after the hours of form you do, sometimes you think there's something drawn 5 and you go, if they really rev that up, I reckon they can cross. But it gets into their mindset that they can't, and so they don't have a crack. But then you've got guys like the best, really, Jack Lawn, Nathan Jack, Greg Sugars, who know their form very well, and also Jimmy Herbertson, people who actually go, I'm going to have a crack here. But sometimes I think they're a bit too conservative, and we'll talk about some not burning questions, but a slightly different version a little bit later, where we'll be talking about intent. But the other thing is, this is similar to thoroughbred racing. Those sectionals that are put out are fantastic, but I think quite often people look at the fastest last half, fastest last quarter, and they don't factor in you are a go back 1 run horse.
Yeah.
But you get them thoroughbreds as well.
Of course you
can't get overly consumed with the idea that the last half is the quickest if you're going to be in a very similar position most of the time.
You cannot
events.
You cannot have Cosimo going in your black book every single week because you'll very quickly learn it doesn't work.
I wonder if you would be up though backing you.
Yeah, well, maybe, I suppose.
Because it probably goes around 20.
True. A couple of questions on data for you, Jace. Sectionals. Yeah. What's your most important sectional and your second most important sectional?
James is on the text. You were slab. My most important sectional is in a race over a middle trip race.
Yep.
Sam Nadai from back in the day in the gig. Lead time is by far the most important sectional. Would you agree?
Yes, and it's the one most misunderstood, I think, and most often overlooked.
Even though Dan Malecki regularly explains, and that is the distance.
That is the distance from the start.
But honestly, lead time clearly the most important.
Yep.
And then what I've always felt is that you want to get down to 50-meter sectionals off the gate, 50, 100, don't you? Because, again, you are not going to be able to make a speed map purely on those. But if you had 100-meter sectional, you can go, well, at its quickest, this is what the horse can do.
And J-Bon, as you well know, there's a reason that those 2 sectionals are in the sectional reports. And it was for that exact reason, in the hope of eventually turning them into data speed maps. So I certainly hope that project is still one day in the wings.
I've given myself away.
I think it would be great.
Well, I'll give this away. I did. You know what I'm going to do in the next week, I reckon? I'm going to do a YouTube.
Where do I start? Yep.
I've actually become really obsessed with physics at the moment. I'm watching a lot of Albert Einstein and Isaac Newton, but I'm going to do a YouTube tutorial on how I do maps.
Brilliant. That'd be good.
For the pace setters and tongue tie off.
We'll call it the cartographer with J-Bon.
Well, really, the thing is, the one thing that I try to educate the group in at 400 Epsom Road with is you can work out some element of mapping with those 100-meter sectionals. And I've given myself away that I don't really look at them because I didn't even know they had them. And I just don't look at. I don't look at all that stuff. I'm not even 100% sure it's totally accurate. But now I've met it's a controversy now.
It's pretty good.
But the other thing is, but the other thing is you need to be able to look at, again, the intent. So I educated them, go through the last 20 runs, frontline runs, particular draws, and you can come up with an idea of, okay, barriers 1 to 4, this horse leads 30% of the time. But that's going to get you about halfway home, isn't it? Yeah, that's why I always talk about form being left brain, right brain. Because you do the data, and then you've got to use your experience, your intuition, knowing the drivers, sometimes the relationships, doing some psychology, laying them down on the couch. And it's a process. But I'll tell you what, it might be a little bit harder than a couple of other sports or a couple of other codes, but it is far more rewarding.
Second question for you, Jace, is around distance covered. Now, this one, to the logical people, seems obvious, but it's not, okay? And that is, if a horse covers an extra 20, 30 metres in the run versus the horse that's on the pegs, we know the pegs is the place to be. But how much do you factor in to the distance covered in a race? And I want to throw this one at you. If you're in the breeze and you're in the 1-1, you're both covering exactly the same extra distance, aren't you? Until nearing the home turn, when the horse who's done all the work hits the front, cuts to the inside, and then on paper, the horse who's had the 1-1 trail actually is getting more credit than the horse who's been in the breeze based on data alone, because it's covered more ground.
Mick Guerin tried to explain this at one point, and it was educational, but ultimately it doesn't make sense, because if you actually factored in how much extra ground you're covering over 2,240 metres off the pegs as opposed to on, it's enormous, is it not?
Well, it'd be, we see 20, 30 metres.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense. And I'll give you a great example. People often get so excited when they see a trotter gallop and lose 70 metres, and then they rush home and run third. And then the average punter's going, well, I'm having everything next start. Do they ever win next start? I think they win one. A lot of this is where the numbers lie, because if you actually factored in the numbers of losing 70 or 80 metres in a run and then finishing 5 metres from the winner, you'd go, well, that thing is 70 metres better than them.
Exactly.
But it's not.
It never happens that way.
No, it's not.
And that's the great mystery of trying to say that to a non-racing person, when they'd say it doesn't make sense if it's 60 metres and it was beaten, if it was beaten, what am I trying to say?
But that's why it's not a mathematical equation. Like it's not a computer game. You don't get your little graph and go, we'll add 60 metres to it and it'll win by 60 metres next time. It doesn't happen.
No, but it's also not useless data. It is important data when overlaid with everything else.
Well, the one thing quickly I love about data is it will incite people to have a bet.
True.
But my long-held belief is, if they're using that data alone and they lose religiously for 6 months, will they keep betting?
Did you ever know of a punter back in the days of tech form in the race book who just bet on tech form and gave up on the game because tech form ratings wasn't doing it for them?
But he then moved on to the Sky Predictor, yeah?
Oh, true. Yes. Yeah. And we don't want to keep throwing out names. It's a good discussion. It's a very good discussion. I think data is important, but I'm with you. I think it's only one piece of a puzzle.
Use it.
Yep.
But again, it's a big algorithm. And the thing you spoke about earlier is worth touching on again as well, is add in, if you're going to make your own algorithm, the breeze is obviously a far more difficult place to be than 1-1.
So you actually have to be, you've got to be factoring in.
You have to create an algorithm to work out how much harder is it to be there, according to what times, when you got there, lead times. And ultimately, my style, your style, is not to get absolutely down in the mud with all that stuff, because I feel like it confuses the issue when you can use your intuition and your experience and your understanding of certain horses, rather than believing you can spit out a number at the end of an equation and that will tell you the winner. Yeah.
Yep. It's a great discussion. That's data. That's fixed odds. Join us on Twitter. Get involved in a conversation and let us know your thoughts. And if you've got other topics that you want us to touch on in this first part of the podcast, tongue tie off, let us know. Flick us a line, and we'd be more than happy to factor that into our thinking, Jace.
And very quickly, we'd just like to apologise to all of the people we offended in this particular segment. And by the way, Mick Kieran, I love you. I love you, Mick. But it's just that element of the numbers not adding up. And that very quickly, again, that's the issue with it. I love the fact that we give data to people, but if you leave them to their own devices, I think anyone who loses religiously in anything that they do on the punt, whether it's, well, the pokies seem to get people back, but everything else, you will eventually just say, well, all of this doesn't make sense. So that's my concern. But it has been a great discussion and a couple of talking points we will address with guests in coming weeks, Cody Winnell.
Yep. Looking forward to getting a few on.